最強ってのはこういうことだ。
Welcome back, 7 Deadly Sins enjoyers. I managed to get a lot of valuable feedback on my previous Lancelot video. Many of you enjoyed it, so I got more for you. Now, I was debating making a video for Meliodas and Elizabeth, but at the time I was fed up with the meta and I wasn't even uploading any videos at all. But if you still want to see a breakdown on them, just let me know down below and I'll get right on that. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the collab. I'm gonna start it off with my personal most anticipated character, Mazino. The showcase had me going crazy because I thought he would for sure be the next Milim tier character due to the way his passive was worded, but when I got him in game, he definitely did not live up to the hype. Nevertheless, I've had some time to sit with him and I think he's decent and might age really well, just like Naofumi did. Same as last time, we're gonna start off talking about his kit, then we're going to look into how he works during gameplay, we're gonna go over some equipments for him and how to gear him. Finally, we're gonna talk about some teams, some things that I tested, what works and what doesn't, before I give you a final verdict and my thoughts on the unit. As usual, I don't delve too deep into character stats and whatnot. Whenever I need to determine more or less where a character's power stands, I just head to GameWith and take a look at the CC ranking. And in this case, Mazino's ranked 17th in the game. Now onto his cards. Mazino follows the trends of his cards looking deceptively simple, but you need to understand his kit in order to know when and how to properly use them. So his skill 1 inflicts Skybreak damage. What Skybreak does is it grants him a plus 50% attack increase when he uses this card, and it boosts his crit damage times 2. His skill 2 will decrease the enemy's defense related stats for 2 turns and then inflict burst damage. Here again, burst damage grants a 2 times crit damage increase, and if the enemy is debuffs, which they always will be because when you use this card it applies a debuff, you gain 50% damage dealt increase. Finally, his ultimate is very simple. He gives himself a stat increase and applies a barrier to all allies for 2 turns, and then he inflicts AoE damage. His relic is again one of the most simple ones in the game. He gives himself a 50% crit chance increase whenever anyone on the field dies. Now moving on to his passive, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. First off, he grants himself a 5% all stat increase for each ally on the field. Then he'll apply a taunt to himself for 1 turn, and then he'll apply Power of the King to himself and Shinsu Barrier to all allies for 2 turns. What Power of the King does is it increases his attack related stats and increases the damage dealt of single target attacks by 30%. The Shinsu Barrier, on the other hand, it acts like a Green Merlin shield where it gives him a regular barrier with 300% of his attack power as strength, but it also reduces the damage taken by 80%. We're not done yet though. Once it's your turn again, if the enemies manage to pop 1 or more of your shield, Mazino gains a 20% damage increase per missing shield. And lastly, if Mazino drops under 50% HP, he gets a full cleanse, full heals, becomes damage immune, and he grants himself ruler of the tower for 2 turns. Which basically translates to his single targets now deal 100% more damage and are 50% more likely to crit. Now on paper, all of this sounds fantastic. Like I was saying earlier, you read all of that and you think this guy is Exodia since he has stacks on stacks on stacks of damage reduction, immunity, and damage increase. However, I need to explain further. His turn 1 damage reduction with the shield is just that, with the shield. If it goes away, Mazino is vulnerable to taking a fat hit and dying. So far, I've seen him get hard countered by Estarossa, Rimuru, and Levi because his buffs are not gray, they're blue. Secondly, his passive also states that if you or your allies lose a shield, you gain damage reduction based on how many are gone. But again, that only takes effect after the turn when the shield disappears, it's not instant. So again, if an enemy can safely remove the shield and one-shot Mazino, you're done. He's not covered by any damage reduction at that point. The next problem I have with him is the invincibility. You read one turn invincible and you think, yo, this is final boss Escanor in PvP? In reality, not at all. The invincibility only applies during the turn it was triggered. For example, if Mazino were to get hit 3 times, but the first hit landed him below the 50%, the next 2 hits, they won't count. That's what makes him invincible. Now, me personally, I don't understand why they wouldn't extend the immunity to be more like Malim's, where for a full turn you could just make whatever play you want and be safe from death the next time the enemy can play. I understand that we don't want to make characters too strong, but at this point, none of his defensive capabilities make sense. I've used him quite a bit and I still think he's just a glass cannon with some gimmicks. The last problem I have with him is a bit hit or miss. I don't think his below 50% passive triggers properly, and I know with Tarmiel Link, if he drops below 50 and then he heals up, the passive is bricked, it doesn't work. But even without Tarmiel Link, I've seen my Mazino drop like exactly at half and the passive just doesn't work. Now, I can't confirm this with numbers, but based on what I can see, it feels a bit wonky. I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but just let me know. To me, it just feels weird. Okay, so I picked this gameplay because you can more or less see what's supposed to be going on in the battle. And here at the start of the match, you can see his passive triggers. He has a taunt, and he applies his shield for every ally. Here we're gonna make some regular plays, just click our cards and keep going with the match. Watch Levi use his cards, Mazino using his cards too. We kill off that Yuri, because we don't want her to start sealing our AoEs. Here the enemy Mazino attacks. Boom, he triggers my passive. From here on out, he can't attack Mazino anymore because I resist everything. See the invincibility is triggering. They can't damage me at all. Back on our turn again, you can see there's 1 stack of damage reduction because he only popped 1 shield. So we continue, and here we use our cards again. Levi Infect, Iwa AoE, and this kills. The single target, it's being boosted by Mazino's passive, so there's no need to even think, just destroy them. And that's pretty much it. He's not really a complicated character, so that's most of his kit covered already. So the usual rule of thumb applies here. I make HP def sets by default for everyone and attack crit if he's being used in PvE. Although some further research might be required, because I've heard he needs crit chance substat rolls, else his damage will fall off. And personally, as of right now, I haven't played him in geared since I stick to ungeared. But I have watched him play in Brawl and I'm underwhelmed by his performance. He constantly misses crits and he fails to kill anyone before Lancelot has to come in and finish the job with his AoEs. Unfortunately, I do not have Nastians, although I heard Mazino performs really well with him, and I suspect this would help him a lot with the tankiness issues. I just am not a whale, so I can't go for most of the 600 banner units and still have enough to summon on festivals and collabs. Also, I acknowledge that not everyone will have Sigurd, as even I didn't have him before the collab. So for most of the teams that I'll list next, you can probably, and you probably should, replace Sigurd with Escanor on sub, because as you all know, most PvP games are unfortunately determined by whoever goes first. Okay, now starting with what I think is the best team composition for him, we have Mazino, Yiwa, Arthur, and Sigurd. Now this team, I like it a lot because it allows you to go first or second and do decently well against the enemy, mostly because Yiwa allows you to reflect damage on the Elizabeth shield, and if you don't have a good way to deal with it, you'll see in the next few teams that I showcase, it's very difficult to make a comeback when this character is just beyond broken. If you can't break the shield, they just go berserk and destroy your whole field. But for now, we have this comp that I think works really well, because turn 1 you have your protection from Mazino. If they manage to break Mazino's shield, Yiwa can come in with the reflect, and turn 2, Arthur can just finish up and sweep whatever is left of the field. Here's another good team that I tried. I wasn't really having any good luck at first until I realized the problem is I wasn't going first. This is a team that you really want to go first with. It's Mazino, Escanor, Lancelot, and Sigurd on sub. And for this team to work really well, you want to try to get rid of Meliodas and Elizabeth first and really quickly. Otherwise, like I said just now, the shield will come out, you'll have a really difficult time breaking it, and you'll most likely lose. And third place, we have Mazino, Lancelot, Lilia, and Sigurd. Once again, the main problem you'll need to contend with is an Elizabeth shield. It's the bane of PvP right now. You'll hear this a lot from me. The main problem in this meta is you need to get rid of that shield or you lose. And with this team, Lilia has the corrosion that breaks it, so that works really well. But a bonus is Lilia acts as sort of a defensive unit for Lancelot and Mazino, where if they can't take any damage, she'll heal up and she'll allow you to infect the enemy and make some counter plays. So I really like this comp. Next up, we have Mazino, Lancelot, like Percival, and Sigurd on sub. I'm not gonna lie to you, don't try this at home. This sucks. This team sucks. The first problem with it is Percival will heal your characters if you take too much damage. So while you're trying to proc Mazino's passive, the one that drops him below 50%, it's probably never gonna happen because Percival's passive keeps healing him back. And it's really difficult to have high CC with this team, so you're most likely gonna go second, and you're most likely gonna take a lot of damage, and that's a turn where more or less your passives are just wasted. And from there, we come into the main problem of PvP right now. Elizabeth will have her shield up, and it's going to be borderline impossible to break it for this team. The last team I tried is one I don't really like as much either. Mostly, well, you know what's coming next. Elizabeth shield. So it's Mazino, Milim, Dian, and Nanashi. Here you're gonna really try to rely on Milim being an overpowered character, and the fact that she's being run without another support to help boost her damage, you're gonna have a hard time killing your enemies, and you're gonna have a really hard time breaking the shield. So you can see it in this clip, this very clip, that I'm struggling to win, and I feel the only reason I really won is because Milim is a broken character, but otherwise this match would not have gone smoothly if I didn't have her. Now, Mazino is an extremely powerful character on his own, there's no doubt about this in my mind, but he struggles a lot against the current meta, and the passive portion of his kit, in my opinion, feels severely undercooked. Like, they were really cooking with all of the damage reduction and the immunity stuff, and then they realized, wait, we don't want a second Milim in the game, let's handicap him a bit. And so now we're left with this character who, when he works extremely well and he can hard carry his team. But if he dies before his passive can kick in, which is very easy to do, it's GG. The current collab banner is terrible. It's one of the worst I've seen in a while. Even if it's not as bad as the previous one, the only character of any value in there I'd say is Sigurd. And that's only if you seriously play PvP. If you're missing most of the pool at 1/6, I would say Summon. If you play a lot of PvP and participate in Chaos Battle, I'd say go for one of each, Mazino, Yiwa, and Yuri, and then quit while you're ahead. Because Mazino and Yiwa unironically dominate Chaos, and they turn it from a whale-only game mode to a use your brain or get lost game mode, and I love it. If you're a collector, well, they're worth collecting, I guess? Otherwise, if you're just someone who casually plays PvE, who doesn't take the game too seriously, I've heard Mazino is good for the bird, but not a must-have, so you're better off just praying you get him out of the free tickets, and otherwise just skip the banner. So, how did your polls go? Did you have any luck? Do you have any thoughts on Mazino or the collab as a whole? Drop anything you need to say in the comments. I'd love to hear what everyone else thinks. Thanks for watching and stay tuned. Next up, I'm gonna try to have the Yiwa video coming up.